being a superhero might sound awesome, but actually in practice it's a pretty terrible experience. When you're not fighting for your life, you're failing to save the lives of those closest to you, or even worse, killing them off yourself. With that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 11 comic book characters who killed their loved ones. 11. Iron Man. While 2006's Civil War saw a whole multitude of casualties across the heroes and villains of Marvel Comics, one of the first people to lose their life during the battle was Happy Hogan, and in Iron Man Volume 4:14, it's implied that Tony Stark was ultimately responsible for ending the life of his longtime friend. In an attempt to lure Stark out into his crosshairs, the Spy Master ambushes a dinner date of Happy Hogan and Pepper Potts, with the Rogue threatening to kill both of Tony's closest pals. Not taking too kindly to this, Happy lashes out at Spy Master, which unfortunately results in the pair falling several stories to an unhappy landing. Following this fall, Hogan is left in a coma, and Pepper appeals to Tony to put Happy out of his misery, regaling Stark with a story about a boxer named Cobra McCoyle. After a career of being hit on the head, McCoyle was unable to look after himself or even feed himself, something which Pepper says Happy specifically said he never wanted to be like. Shortly after, Happy Hogan passes away, with it implied that Stark used his tech to end his dear friend's suffering and shut down Happy's life support. 10. Magneto. House of M famously flipped the world of Marvel Comics upside down, with an unstable, erratic Wanda Maximoff creating a new reality where mutants rule the world. In particular, it's Wanda's father Magneto who rules the roost here. However, as the story progresses, the Master of Magnetism finds out that Quicksilver, his own son and the brother of Wanda, has manipulated Scarlet Witch into altering reality around him. Shockingly, the incensed Magneto reacts to this by killing Pietro. Reality would later be reset again by Wanda, which in turn had Quicksilver once again amongst the living. But the cold, hard truth is that Magneto willingly, purposefully, killed his son before House of M was no more. 9. Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner's father was not the best. A heavy drinker, upon Bruce's arrival into the world, his father believed his son to have what he labelled the monster gene, and it wouldn't be long before Brian started to abuse and assault both his wife and Bruce. Tragically, just when Bruce and his mother Rebecca finally decided to make their escape from this horrendous situation, Brian caught them and brutally murdered his wife in front of Bruce. Eventually, Brian Banner would spend 15 years locked up in a mental institution. Having been deemed fit to return to society, Brian ends up in the care of his son. That relationship soon went sour again, however, and an argument at Rebecca's grave saw Bruce kill his father after accidentally causing Brian to hit his head on his wife's headstone. In the years since, Bruce and his Hulk alter ego have been haunted by the spirit of Brian Banner, with some of the Green Goliath's Rogues Gallery using the image and memory of Brian to torment the Hulk. 8. Wolverine. What loved one hasn't Wolverine killed? Well, let's talk about the time he killed his son. That moment came in Rick Remender's run on Uncanny X-Force, with Weapon X left with no other choice but to permanently take down his troubled offspring. Of course, Wolverine and Daken had a long and strained relationship, but this reached tipping point for Daken upon the news that Logan had helped to create a new school for young mutants. Initially planning to kill his old man once and for all, this troubled son then had the intentions of slaying each and every one of Wolverine's students. With no other choice, the battle ultimately came down to Logan drowning his own son in a pool of water. Making this all the more poignant, the prelude to this saw the pair have one of their few real conversations with one another, as both proclaimed their wish that Daken's upbringing and family life had been different. 7. Namor. While Namor the Submariner may have made his affection for Sue Storm well known over the years, Namor's other one true is Mariner, a person who he has had to kill more than once. Easily the most hard-hitting of these deaths was the very first. With Namor and Mariner married, an Alpha Flight crossover saw the Queen of Atlantis undergo a transformation that turned her into a gnarly sea monster known as Leviathan. Taking the ebony blade of the Black Knight, Namor was left with no option but to kill his wife in order to protect the lives of the Avengers and numerous innocent bystanders. Now, Mariner has shown up several times over the years, with Norman Osborn even giving her a makeover as part of Osborn's rivalry with Namor and the X-Men. And each and every time, Namor is left with the emotional weight that comes with having to kill his bride again. 6. Superman. In the continuity of the Injustice universe, Superman is positioned as the main big bad, who is intent on ruling with an iron fist. The moment that cemented this heel turn was the Man of Steel killing the Joker, by pulling out the clown's heart. The reason for Superman doing this is because the Jester of Genocide had duped Kal-El into killing Lois Lane. And not just Lois Lane, but the couple's unborn child who Lois was carrying. Using a mixture of kryptonite and fear toxin, Mr. J had Superman hallucinating and believing that Lois was actually Doomsday. While he wasn't aware of what he was doing, the big blue Boy Scout still tragically killed his wife and unborn child, plus failed to save countless millions of other innocents when the Joker's bomb in Metropolis went off at the same time. 5. X-23. Being the clone of Wolverine is likely going to mean you will have your fair share of traumas, and this has often been the case for X-23. When it comes to killing loved ones, the big one that jumps out for poor old Miss Kinney is the death of her surrogate mother. After numerous attempts at male Wolverine clones failing, it was scientist Sarah Kinney who had the idea to try and create a female clone of Logan. And when this cloning attempt was successful, Sarah took X-23 in as her own daughter and raised her. Unfortunately for the scientist though, X-23 would be her ultimate demise. It wasn't her fault, of course, but she still nonetheless killed her mother figure. Xander Rice created a scent that would send X-23 into a fury, akin to Wolverine's famed Berserker Rage. A tragic fallout of this rage was X-23 unwittingly killing Sarah Kinney, with Sarah using her final breaths to actually bestow the Laura name on her surrogate daughter. 4. Cyclops. Ever since the X-Men debuted in 1963, Scott Summers is someone who has so often been at the side of Charles Xavier. Scott was Professor X's star pupil, and was tasked with leading the X-Men on many a mission. That made it all the more startling and impactful when Cyclops murdered his longtime mentor and father figure during the Avengers vs. X-Men arc. To see Xavier's once prized student, with whom he had shared so much, be the one to kill the guy, yeah, that was a hard take. In Scott's defense, he was possessed by the Phoenix Force at this point. Even after banishing the Phoenix though, Cyclops as a character was going in a new direction, with him taking a more aggressive, violent approach in campaigning for mutant rights. 3. Orion. Darkseid is one of the most clinical and violent beings in all of comics, and even though his son Orion has for so long butted heads with this villain, that doesn't take away from the fact that Orion still has a special place in his heart for Darkseid. You can't choose your parents, and for poor old Orion, his dad just happens to be a cruel tyrant, intent on complete and utter domination. For Orion, the prophecy of the new god states that he is the only person capable of killing Darkseid, and thus he knows somewhere down the line he's gonna have to murder his own father. During the countdown to Final Crisis, that actually happened. For a character who had so rarely tasted true defeat up until that point in time, it was huge to see Darkseid put down after Orion tore out his heart. Well, it would have been if DC hadn't tried to explain that Darkseid's essence had actually travelled back in time, and then he shot a bullet back in time again to kill Orion before he could mess with Darkseid, leaving Batman to kill Darkseid instead. Still, even though his old man was an uber rogue of the highest order, one has to imagine that killing your own father, even if they are Darkseid, was a tough emotional moment for Orion. 2. Sharon Carter. While she was admittedly under mind control at the time, it was still a massive shock to both readers and Agent 13 alike to see Sharon Carter kill Steve Rogers. This all took place in the aftermath of Civil War, with Captain America not only assassinated by his longtime colleague, but also by a Sharon who was at that point his pregnant girlfriend. As alluded to, Carter didn't carry out this act on her own. Dr. Faustus had brainwashed her and forced her to deliver the shot that finally took down Captain America. At the time it happened, this really was played up as the genuine death of Steve Rogers, All of the major US news outlets reported the news, and Rogers would actually be dead for 2 years before making his return in Captain America Reborn. In the fallout of Cap's demise, Sharon Carter spent the subsequent months having her mind again manipulated, and she'd even end up working for Red Skull before she finally broke free. 1. Hal Jordan. For 35 years, Hal Jordan had been one of DC's greatest heroes, protecting Earth and further reaches of the galaxy as a Green Lantern. But in 1994, Jordan lost the plot in the most intense, brutal, and honestly engaging of ways. It was in the Emerald Twilight arc that Hal dropped his Green Lantern moniker and took on the name of Parallax, and Jordan became one of the most powerful villains in comics. After Mongol and Cyborg Superman destroy Hal's hometown of Coast City and everyone who lived there, Jordan went against the Green Lantern Corps and used his power ring to recreate his home city. Irked upon being chastised for his actions, Hal took off on a mission to Oa to confront the Guardians. Along the way, the enraged Green Lantern killed many of his fellow Emerald Knights, collecting their power rings as he went. So many of these fallen GLs were long-time close friends of Hal Jordan's, and to see him murder numerous people he had spent years caring for was majorly jarring at the time, all as Jordan continued on his dark path to becoming Parallax. And there you have it, folks, 11 comic book characters who killed their loved ones. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at @USlyDogU. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.